The quiet tick of the old wall clock echoed through my study as I read the notice saying my wife and her lawyer lover stole $8 million from me. Still, I didn't move. I just brushed my thumb along the clock's wooden edge to steady my breath. As that ticking deepened, it pulled me back to my grandfather's cabin and the year carved into his lockbox, 1948. While each second passed, I realized they'd only taken what they could see. The same ticking whispered what they'd missed, a fortune sealed decades before they were born. That's when I decided their victory died the moment I opened that box. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. The November sky over Richmond had that dull, winter is coming heaviness to it, the kind that made the early evening look like midnight. Bill Hargrove sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table, knife idle in his hand, watching the steam rise from a plate he wasn't hungry for. Across from him, Rebecca moved her fork slowly, distracted, her eyes fixed on some invisible point over his shoulder. The house was warm, lit, familiar, yet the air felt colder than the weather outside. Bill couldn't remember when their dinners had become this silent, when their marriage had turned into a polite arrangement of two people occupying the same space without touching the same world. He cleared his throat lightly. Everything all right? Rebecca blinked as if waking from somewhere far away. Yes, just busy. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed, the same one she used at charity boards and country club luncheons. She reached for her glass without looking at him. The charity events this month are overwhelming. She said it casually, but Bill caught the slight tension in her jaw, the way her fingers curled around the stem of her glass like she needed it to steady herself. Charity events, her favorite shield these days. She threw the phrase out every time she didn't want to answer a deeper question. He nodded, letting it pass, but a small ache built in his chest. They used to talk, really talk. Now every word felt like a courtesy, every conversation a negotiation. As she pulled out her phone and positioned its screen down beside her plate, Bill noticed the new lock screen, a passcode she hadn't used before, and the case, new, sleek, metallic rose. Rebecca wasn't the type to change things impulsively, not without a reason. Lately she'd been taking her calls in the hallway, ending conversations the moment he entered a room. Nights had stretched later and later with her returning home claiming board meetings or charity planning sessions. Her tone, once soft and amused even when frustrated, now carried a clipped sharpness that made Bill second-guess every simple question. He tried again. You've been out late a lot recently. Rebecca stiffened. Bill, please, I told you I have responsibilities. She glanced at her phone again, not meeting his eyes. I don't know why you're suddenly keeping score. I'm not keeping score, he said quietly, but even he could hear the doubt underlying the words. The next morning, Harold Whitman stopped by unexpectedly. Bill hadn't seen him in a few weeks. Harold, with his weathered banker's confidence and sharp instincts, was usually all humor and warmth. But today his expression carried something else, something hesitant. Bill, he began after they settled in the old leather chairs of the study, I don't want to stir anything, but I saw Rebecca yesterday. Bill smiled faintly. That's not exactly surprising. She's everywhere these days. Harold didn't smile back. She wasn't at a charity event. He paused. She was with Dennis Crane. Bill's brow tightened. Dennis, our lawyer. Harold nodded slowly. And not at the office. They were at the Lakeshore Bistro together, close. He searched Bill's eyes. I wasn't going to say anything, but it didn't look professional. Bill exhaled sharply, leaning back. For a moment the room felt too small, the wooden walls pressing inward. But then he shook his head. Harold, she and Dennis have been working on estate planning. Maybe they grabbed lunch afterward. She's under pressure. I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Harold didn't argue. He only said, just be careful, and left it at that. All day Bill turned the comment over in his mind. Rebecca with Dennis. Dennis, who had always seemed overly polished, overly confident. But no, Rebecca didn't, she wouldn't. He pushed the idea aside. People see things out of context. Harold was probably mistaken. That evening, Rebecca came into the study holding a slim folder of papers. "Bill, I need you to sign these." She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. "What are they?" "Routine financial updates. Dennis told me they needed your signature by tomorrow." Her eyes flicked to the papers, never to him. Bill reached out, but something inside him paused his ND midair. "Let me look through them first." She sighed sharply. "Bill, for God's sake, it's standard paperwork. You act like you don't trust me." He looked at her, really looked, and realized he couldn't remember the last time she had touched him without flinching or smiled without calculation. Her patience with him had evaporated months ago, maybe years. He set the papers down gently. "I'm not signing anything tonight." She turned away, jaw tight. "Fine, do whatever you want." When she left the room, the silence that followed felt heavier than her presence. Bill sat alone under the dim lamp, the folder untouched in front of him, and an ache began spreading from his chest to his gut. Maybe it was Harold's words echoing. Maybe the secrecy, the coldness, the shifting distance that had crept into their marriage like frost creeping across glass. Whatever it was, he finally let himself acknowledge the truth. Something was breaking, and he wasn't sure if it had already broken long before tonight. He stared at the closed door Rebecca had walked through, realizing, slowly, painfully, that trust in their home hadn't just faded. It had been dissolving quietly, piece by piece, right under his nose. And tomorrow, he feared, would bring answers he wasn't ready to face. Dennis Crane's office sat on the top floor of a refurbished brick building in downtown Richmond, polished to that sterile, modern glow lawyers like to pretend made them trustworthy. Bill stepped inside, greeted by a receptionist who smiled too tightly, as though instructed to be pleasant but not warm. She led him to Dennis's door, which swung open before she even knocked. "Bill," Dennis said, his grin wide, rehearsed, almost predatory. Come in, always good to see you." Bill nodded, stepping into the office with its glass walls, designer furniture, and framed certificates arranged like trophies. Dennis closed the door behind him and gestured toward a chair that felt more like a witness stand than a seat. "You've been on my mind," Dennis began as he moved behind his desk. "Your portfolio is outdated. We should modernize your asset protection." His tone held the smooth confidence of a man certain his opinion was fact. Bill frowned slightly. "I thought everything was already structured well. You and I reviewed it last year." Dennis chuckled, a soft, dismissive sound. "Oh, last year, Bill, the financial landscape changes by the week, and with your age, your exposure is increasing. You don't want unnecessary risk." He slid a sleek folder across the desk. "Lucky for you, I've drafted a few strategies." Bill rested his hand on the folder but didn't open it. Something felt off. "What kind of strategies?" "Oh, the usual trust adjustments, consolidation measures, rights of representation." Dennis waved a hand casually, as though these weren't major life-altering financial actions. "All perfectly standard." Bill opened the folder. The wording felt thick with legal jargon, vague in areas where specificity should be non-negotiable. "Some of these clauses, they're unclear," he said slowly. Dennis leaned forward, that too-white smile returning. "That's why I'm your attorney, Bill. You don't need to understand every detail. You just need to know I'm protecting you." Before Bill could respond, the door opened. Rebecca stepped inside, her perfume arriving a second before she did. "Sorry I'm late," she said, brushing a hand through her hair as she sat beside Dennis, not Bill. Dennis's eyes flicked to her briefly, too familiar, too comfortable. Bill looked between them. "I didn't know you'd be joining us." "I asked Dennis to keep me in the loop," she said lightly, "since these are family matters." But her tone held an edge, as though daring him to challenge her. Bill returned to the documents. "There's missing information here. No specifics on where these accounts shift to, And this clause, this is giving someone else control. Bill, Rebecca cut in, irritated. Why are you nitpicking? You've never cared about this level of detail before. Maybe I care now. Rebecca exchanged a glance with Dennis, quick, subtle, but unmistakably aligned. Dennis knows what he's doing, she said sharply. We wouldn't be here if he didn't. Dennis folded his hands. I promise you, everything is for your benefit. Benefit, the word hung in the air like a hook. That evening, Michael stopped by the house. He noticed the tension the moment he stepped inside, the same way a person senses a storm long before the rain falls. You all right, Dad? He asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. Bill handed him the folder. Tell me what you think. Michael scanned the first few pages, his expression shifting. These are odd. Some of these clauses give a third-party access to your accounts. And these signatures, Dad, do you know how many scam cases start with paperwork like this? I'd slow down. Bill sighed, rubbing his temples. Your stepmother says I'm overreacting. Michael didn't respond. He did. And need to. Minutes later, Rebecca walked in, her heels echoing across the hardwood floor. She saw the folder in Michael's hand and stiffened. Why is he looking at that? Because I wanted a second opinion, Bill answered. Her face tightened. You don't trust me, that's what this is. You don't trust your own wife. Rebecca, that's not what I. It is. Her voice trembled with manufactured hurt. I've been trying to manage things for us, and you make me feel like a stranger in this house. The guilt she attempted to stir was almost immediate, but something inside Bill resisted it. Still, she pressed on, her tone turning cold. If you won't sign anything without dragging outsiders into our marriage, then what's the point of involving me at all? Michael stepped back, knowing this was a fight he wasn't welcome in. And in that fraught silence, weary from the pressure and tension, Bill finally sat down at the dining table, pulled one of the simpler documents from the stack, and signed it. Just one page. Just one signature. Rebecca exhaled softly, as if relieved. Dennis would be, too. Later, after everyone went to their separate corners of the house, Bill stared at the folder again, a tightness taking root in his chest. He had no idea that the stroke of his pen had already set something in motion. Something he wouldn't fully understand until it was far too late. The call came just after 9 in the morning, catching Bill midway through his second cup of coffee. The house was unusually quiet. Rebecca had left early, mumbling something about a committee meeting. Bill almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something nudged him to pick up. Mr. Hargrove, a man said, hesitant, professional. This is Daniel Morris from First Dominion Bank. Bill straightened. Yes, this is he. I'm calling to confirm the ownership changes you requested yesterday. We need clarification before finalizing. Bill felt a chill creep up his spine. What ownership changes? Daniel paused, clearly surprised. The transfer of trustee authority and the beneficiary updates on your investment accounts. We received documents signed under your name and your attorneys. Bill tightened his grip on the phone. I didn't authorize any of that. I see, Daniel said slowly. That's concerning. Perhaps speak with your attorney and call us back. We'll hold the changes for 24 hours. When the call ended, Bill stared at the phone as if waiting for it to explain itself. His signature, his accounts, trustee authority, all changed without him. His pulse thudded heavily. Something was terribly wrong. When Rebecca returned that afternoon, he met her in the foyer, the words tumbling out before he could soften them. Why is the bank calling about ownership changes I never authorized? She blinked once, then her face shifted into a mask of exasperation. Bill, honestly, you're worrying over nothing again. Nothing, he echoed. They said documents were submitted with my signature. Well, she said, shrugging off her coat, maybe you forgot. You've been overwhelmed lately. He stared at her. I don't forget something like transferring trustee rights. Rebecca sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her hip. This is why Dennis is helping us. You get confused, and he knows how to structure things properly. You need to stop assuming every little thing is an attack. Confused, overwhelmed, forgetful. She said the words softly, gently, but they landed like stones. Gaslighting in its most polished form. "I'm not confused," he said quietly. "Bill," she replied, her tone dripping with manufactured patience, "you don't understand how complex these things are. Dennis explained all of this to you." "No, he didn't." Rebecca's lips pressed together. "You're being paranoid." He didn't argue, not because he believed her, but because the argument felt like stepping into quicksand, every push sinking him deeper while she stood untouched on solid ground. Later that afternoon, Emma stopped by unexpectedly, bringing coffee and pastries like she used to when she lived nearby. She sensed the tension almost instantly. Rebecca's curt greetings, her clipped answers, the cold air between her and Bill that had once been warmth. When Rebecca walked into the living room, Emma followed her. "Is something going on between you and Dad?" she asked softly. Rebecca froze. "What makes you think that?" "You barely look at him. You've been short with him for weeks. And I hear things when I visit, your tone, your distance. He's hurting, Mom." Rebecca stiffened at the word Mom, a title Emma used sparingly. "Emma, please, you don't understand the stress I'm under." "Then talk to him," Emma pressed. "He loves you, he's trying." Rebecca picked up her handbag without another word. "I don't have time for this. I'm late." "For what?" Emma asked. Rebecca didn't answer. She walked out the front door, the sharp click of the latch sounding far too final. Bill watched from the hallway unseen, the quiet. That followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, like something essential had been removed from the house and replaced with nothing. After Emma left, he returned to the stack of financial documents sitting on his desk, papers he had been too tired, too trusting, too distracted to fully examine. He spread them across the surface, smoothing the pages with trembling hands. The first thing he noticed was the wording, adjustment of beneficiary designation, then another, reallocation of control authority, and another, updated estate assignments. All subtle enough that someone skimming could dismiss them, all significant enough to reshape control of his life's work. He leaned closer, reading line after line, his chest tightening with each detail. Names had shifted, percentages adjusted, rights reassigned. In small increments, always small, just enough to seem harmless, just enough to slip past a man who still believed his wife stood at his side. But then he saw it. At the bottom of nearly every page, next to Rebecca's flowing signature, were the initials. D.C. Dennis Crane. Not as witness. Not as advisor. As co-authority. Bill's breath caught. His hands began to shake, not just with anger but with something deeper. A realization thick and heavy, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't lift. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't misunderstanding. This wasn't routine. This was intrusion. Dennis had his initials on documents that changed the very architecture of Bill's financial world. And Rebecca, his wife, had signed right beside him. Bill sat back in his chair, the edges of the room blurring as his heartbeat thudded in his ears. He didn't want to believe it. He wasn't ready to believe it. But the truth was there, inked into paper. Something was shifting. Power was moving. And he was no longer the one holding it. A cold certainty crept into his bones. Whatever Rebecca and Dennis were planning, it had already begun. The email arrived before sunrise, a sterile notification from his brokerage firm. Bill almost deleted it, assuming it was another monthly update, but the subject line froze him mid-motion. Confirmation of liquidation, $8 million. Bill's breath stuttered. He clicked the message open, pulse rising with each line. $8 million, his investments, his retirement cushion, decades of careful building, liquidated. Not transferred, not reinvested. Liquidated. And the confirmation showed an authorization timestamp he didn't recognize. He grabbed his coat and keys without thinking. By the time he reached Dennis Crane's office, the early morning sky had shifted from blue to the sickly gray that matched the ache inside his chest. The receptionist glanced up, startled by the urgency in his steps, but Dennis appeared in his doorway with impeccable timing. "Bill," Dennis said, all faux warmth and polished calm, "I figured you might come by." Bill pushed past him into the office. "Where's my money?" Dennis shut the door with a soft click, the smile never leaving his face. "Let's sit down. I expected some confusion." "No," Bill snapped. "No confusion. $8 million is gone. Explain it." Dennis folded his hands like a man hosting a seminar. "You authorized the liquidation last month, part of the restructuring we discussed." "I never authorized anything," Bill said, voice low and tight. "Not a single damn thing." Before Dennis could respond, the side door opened. Rebecca stepped inside. Bill's stomach turned cold. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't look worried. She didn't even look guilty. She just took her place beside Dennis as though she belonged there. "Bill," she said softly, "let's not do this dramatically." He stared at her. "You're standing next to him." "Because he's helping us," she said firmly. "You agreed to these changes, even if you don't remember every detail." Bill's jaw tightened. "Stop saying I don't remember. I remember everything I sign." Dennis interjected smoothly. "We reviewed these documents together. You were concerned about market volatility. You said." "I didn't say anything," Bill fired back. But Rebecca's sigh cut through him more sharply than Dennis's lies. "Bill, this defensiveness isn't healthy." Healthy, paranoid, forgetful. The labels they kept throwing at him felt like stones piling on his chest. He looked at Rebecca again, searching her face for some flicker of recognition, some sign she knew this was wrong, but her arms were crossed. Her posture mirrored Dennis's. Her loyalty lined up perfectly beside his. Betrayal had a face now, two of them. Dennis gently slid a folder toward him. "The funds were moved into temporary holding accounts. Once the reallocation is complete, you'll see the benefits." "Where?" Bill asked. Dennis didn't answer immediately, and that silence said more than words ever could. Just then the office door swung open again. Michael stormed inside, chest heaving, face tight with anger. "Dad, I came as soon as I saw your message." His eyes hit Dennis, then Rebecca, standing together, and something darkened in his expression. "What the hell is going on?" Michael demanded. Dennis's eyes narrowed. "This is a private conversation." "No," Michael shot back, stepping forward, "it's not. That's my father, and you'd better start talking fast." Dennis's smile thinned. "If you interfere, I'll pursue legal action. This is an official restructuring, and your father has already consented. Any attempt to challenge—" "Challenge what?" Michael barked. "You're fraud." Rebecca gasped. "Michael, that's enough." Dennis straightened, eyes gleaming with warning. "I will not tolerate baseless accusations. Your father is overwhelmed, and we're making decisions in his best interest." Bill felt the words strike like blows. Overwhelmed, incompetent, less than capable. Dennis was painting a picture, and Rebecca was letting him. Michael turned to his father. "Dad, tell me you didn't sign anything like this." "I didn't," Bill whispered. "I swear to God I didn't." Dennis tapped the folder calmly. "Then perhaps your memory simply isn't as sharp. It happens with age." Bill's heart pounded violently. He understood then fully, painfully, that this wasn't just theft. This was a narrative. A weapon. A coordinated effort to make him look incapable so he wouldn't be believed when he argued. Rebecca wasn't confused or manipulated. She was participating. He felt something inside him fracture. Not anger, not even shock, but humiliation. Deep, cutting humiliation. The kind that burned hot and cold at the same time. He turned toward the door, voice a gravelly whisper. "I'm done here." Dennis didn't stop him. Rebecca didn't call after him. Their silence was worse than words. They acted like a man walking away from his own life without understanding how he lost it. That night Bill sat alone in the dimly lit living room, surrounded by shadows stretching across the walls. $8 million gone. His wife siding with another man. His attorney treating him like a liability. He felt stripped of everything he'd built, everything he'd trusted, everything he thought he understood. He lowered his face into his hands, breath shaking. And for the first time in decades, he felt truly powerless. But beneath the humiliation, something else flickered, small, faint, but alive. A question he couldn't yet answer. How far had their betrayal gone? The knock came just after noon, sharp and deliberate, 3 quick taps, then silence. Bill was sitting in the living room, the unpaid bills, confusing emails and bank notices spread across the coffee table like evidence of his own unraveling. He wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody ever knocked that way. He opened the door slowly. A woman stood on the porch, early 40s, dark blazer, badge clipped to her belt. Her eyes held the calm alertness of someone who watched everything at once. "Mr. Hargrove?" she asked. "Yes." She extended a card. "Detective Lisa Carver, Financial Crimes Division. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Dennis Crane." Bill felt his stomach drop. Dennis. He had expected a bank call, maybe another humiliating conversation with an advisor, but not this, not a detective. He stepped aside. "Come in." She followed him into the living room, taking in the scattered paperwork, the signs of a man trying to piece together a puzzle he never knew existed. She sat on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands resting calmly on her knees. "I'll get right to the point," she said. "We've been quietly investigating Mr. Crane for about 8 months. Several of his elderly clients reported unusual asset transfers, inconsistent signatures, sudden power of attorney shifts." She paused. "Your name came up more than once." Bill stiffened. "What do you mean my name came up?" "Mr. Crane listed you as someone he's been advising closely," she explained. "Someone who trusts him implicitly, and recently, someone who's been struggling with cognitive clarity." Bill felt heat rise up his neck. "I didn't say any of that." "I didn't think so," Lisa said. She studied his expression, reading him the way only a seasoned detective could. "Mr. Hargrove, has anything unusual happened with your accounts? Anything suspicious?" Bill hesitated. He could tell her everything. $8 million gone, the signatures he didn't write, the way Dennis and Rebecca had stood united against him, the humiliation that still burned him alive. But something stopped him. Maybe pride, maybe fear, maybe the instinct to not reveal how deeply he'd already been wounded. He swallowed hard. "I've suspected betrayal," he said quietly. "Financial, personal." He forced the words out. "But I haven't confirmed anything." Lisa nodded as though she expected this. "You don't have to tell me details now. Just know this: Dennis Crane is not who he pretends to be, and he's gotten away with a lot." Bill's jaw tightened. "I believe that." Lisa reached into her folder. "I need to show you something. It may be difficult." She laid out 3 glossy photographs on the coffee table. Bill leaned forward, and the world around him seemed to collapse inward, sound draining from the room. The photos were from a resort, palm trees, ocean background, warm lighting, and in each one Rebecca stood beside Dennis, not across a conference table, not in a meeting room. Together, close, her hand resting on his arm, his palm at the small of her back, both of them smiling the way lovers smile, unguarded, careless, confident enough to be seen. The air left Bill's lungs in a single, broken exhale. Detective Carver watched him for a moment, her expression softening. "I'm sorry you're seeing it this way." Bill didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes stayed locked on the images, each one confirming what he had tried so hard to deny. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just paperwork. It wasn't just manipulation. It was her, his wife, standing where she never should have stood. The emotional blow hit harder than the financial betrayal, sharp, intimate, catastrophic. He felt something inside him crack, something he couldn't name but had spent a lifetime protecting. Finally, with his voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "How long have you had these?" 6 weeks, Lisa said. "We gathered them quietly. We didn't know how deep the entanglement went or if you were aware." He nodded numbly. She continued carefully, "I need you to know you're not the first. Dennis preys on vulnerable families. He manipulates, isolates, and gains control of assets slowly. He uses emotional leverage to justify financial decisions." Her gaze sharpened. "And from what I'm seeing here, you've been targeted." Bill stared at the photographs again, his heart throbbing painfully in his chest. "Targeted by both of them," he said softly. Before Lisa could respond, the front door opened. Michael stepped inside, saw the detective, then the photos, then his father's face. "Dad, what happened?" Bill looked up at him, eyes burning with a grief deeper than he'd ever felt. He handed Michael the top photo. Michael froze, then his jaw clenched, anger sparking hard behind his eyes. "I swear," he said through gritted teeth, "I swear we're going to destroy them, legally, publicly, whatever it takes." He turned to Lisa. "Tell me how we start." Lisa lifted a brow, impressed. "First step is documentation. Second is patience. We're building a case." Michael nodded. "Then we'll build one too." Bill sat back, the photographs trembling slightly in his hands. The betrayal had hollowed him out, but beneath the devastation, something new began to form, something steady, grounded, controlled. He didn't speak it aloud. Not yet, but the promise echoed through him like steel tightening in his spine. This betrayal would not be his final chapter. Not by a long shot. Harold showed up unannounced on a gray, windless afternoon, the kind where the air felt heavy, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Bill heard the familiar shuffle of Harold's steps on the porch before the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, his old friend stood there with a solemn look that carried more concern than greeting. "Bill," Harold said gently, "mind if I come in?" Bill stepped aside. They walked into the study, a room now buried under scattered documents and the debris of a life recently upended. Harold sat down slowly, eyes drifting across the chaos but not judging it. He'd seen men collapse under betrayal before. He recognized the wreckage. "I heard about Rebecca leaving," Harold began carefully, "and Dennis being in your life a little too closely." He exhaled, leaning forward. "I've been thinking about something old." Bill's brows knit. "Old?" Harold nodded. "Your grandfather. He had assets they never fully cataloged, accounts he opened in the 40s. Back then things were different. Records weren't digital. Some trusts existed only on paper in locked drawers." Bill frowned, memories stirring. His grandfather had been meticulous about some things and strangely secretive about others. Why bring that up now? "Because you need leverage," Harold said firmly. "Something untouched by Rebecca, untouched by Crane. Something they don't know exists." The idea seemed absurd at first, some forgotten remnant from another era that could matter now. But Bill felt a faint spark of curiosity flicker through the numbness. "Let me think," he murmured. He rose slowly, moving toward the hallway closet, a place he hadn't touched in years. Old coats, boxes of outdated tools, crates of Christmas lights. He dug through them until his hands closed around something cold, metallic. He pulled it out. A faded steel lockbox scuffed at the edges, the hinges rusted. And on the top, etched faintly but unmistakably, were 4 numbers. 1948. Bill felt a jolt, like a hand reaching across generations. He set it on the table between them. Harold's eyes widened slightly. "You kept it." "I didn't even remember it was here," Bill admitted. "Haven't opened it since my 20s. His fingers were steady as he worked the old latch. It resisted at first, protesting decades of neglect, then finally clicked open with a dry metallic snap. Inside, wrapped in brittle wax paper, were documents yellowed with age, stamped with names of banks that no longer existed and account codes written in fountain pen. Bill lifted the top page carefully. "What is this?" Harold leaned in. "This looks like a trust instrument, pre-modern structure, before standardized taxation laws." He took another sheet, squinting. "And this is a certificate of deposit tied to a wartime bond." Bill blinked, uncertain. "Are any of these worth anything?" "Potentially," Harold said, voice low with a mix of caution and excitement. "Some of these old trusts rolled into successor banks. If they survived mergers and weren't closed, they could still be active. And if they're active, they've been accruing growth for decades." Bill stared at the fragile documents as though they were artifacts from a life he never fully understood. His grandfather's legacy materializing at the exact moment he felt he had nothing left. "You're saying this could still exist?" he asked. Harold nodded. "If it was never dissolved, yes." That was enough to push Bill into motion. He picked up the phone and dialed First Dominion Bank, heart thudding as he explained what he had found. He expected confusion. He expected a dismissive response. But the representative paused, then said, "Sir, we need to look deeper. The trust number you're giving me is linked to a predecessor institution. It may take several hours to research." Bill felt a tremor of anticipation he hadn't felt in weeks. "Please do." He hung up and looked at Harold. "If this is real." Harold smiled faintly. "Then you have something no one can touch." Rebecca didn't know about this lockbox. She never cared about dusty corners of old closets. Dennis certainly had no knowledge of it. He only preyed on what he could see, what he could alter, what he could manipulate. This was invisible to them. Later that evening, the bank called back. The tone in the representative's voice was different, more cautious, more respectful. "Mr. Hargrove, the trust is active," she said, "and sealed. No one, not even spouses or attorneys, can access or view it without your express written consent." Bill closed his eyes, a slow, deep breath filling his lungs. "So it's mine?" "Yes, sir. Sole beneficiary status. And it appears the trust has been accruing untouched for quite a long time." He didn't ask about the amount, not yet. Just knowing it existed, protected, invisible, was enough for now. When he set down the phone, Harold studied him quietly. "How much do Rebecca and Crane know?" "Nothing," Bill said. "Absolutely nothing." For the first time since the nightmare began, he felt the ground shift back beneath his feet. Small, quiet, steady. A weapon they overlooked. A door they never thought to check. And in that small, overlooked legacy from 1948, Bill felt the first genuine ember of power returning to his hands. The next morning, Bill walked into the law office of Olivia Marks with the quiet resolve of a man who had finally stopped bleeding. The building wasn't flashy like Dennis Crane's glass-walled vanity project. Olivia's office was older, solid oak doors, muted lighting, and an air of concentrated intellect humming beneath everything. A place where truth was sharpened into a weapon. Olivia Marks stood when he entered, tall, composed, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight knot. Her handshake was firm. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, took in every detail of him, his exhaustion, his anger, his grief, and ignored none of it. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "Harold told me you might come, sit, start from the beginning." Bill did. For the first time, he told the story without hesitation. The forged shifts in authority, the liquidated investments, Rebecca siding with Dennis, the detective's photos, The humiliation, the gaslighting, the fear that he had been played for a fool from the very beginning. Olivia listened without interrupting, the way someone listens who doesn't need theatrics to understand the weight of a truth. When he finished, she leaned back, tapping a pen against her notepad. You've been targeted, plain and simple, but the good news, you're not as powerless as they think. Bill looked at her, searching her expression for false comfort, but there was none. Only strategy, only precision. First step, she said. I'm freezing every remaining joint account you still have access to. Today, right now. Bill blinked. Can you do that so quickly? I can, Olivia said, already typing an email. And I will, before Crane gets another inch into your finances. Within minutes, the requests were sent. Legal language, urgent codes, emergency restrictions. A simple series of keystrokes that slammed the brakes on the quiet theft Dennis and Rebecca had been engineering. For the first time in weeks, Bill felt the faintest lift in his chest, as if the weight pressing down on him had shifted just slightly. But the blowback came fast. 2 hours later, Rebecca stormed into the house like a storm breaking loose. He heard the front door slam, the frantic footsteps, her voice slicing through the hallway. Bill, what did you do? She shouted. He stepped out of the study calmly. I protected my accounts. She threw her purse onto the couch with violent force. You froze our finances without talking to me. Are you out of your mind? Do you want to ruin us out of spite? He stayed steady. Dennis isn't touching another dollar. Her face twisted. This is vengeful. This is unstable. You're letting those children of yours poison you against me. Bill felt a stab of something old and tired. Don't blame Michael. Don't blame Emma. Look at what you've done. Rebecca's voice. She dropped to a venomous whisper. You will regret this. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She spun around, grabbed her keys, and stormed out again, leaving the scent of her anger behind her, sharp and bitter. That evening, the next response landed like a predictable echo. Dennis called. His voice poured through the phone with its usual oily confidence. Bill, I'm hearing concerning reports, freezing accounts, making accusations. I'd advise you to reconsider your actions before they become defamatory. Bill held the phone away slightly, letting the words burn themselves out before answering. I have a new attorney. There was silent, dangerous, simmering silence. Then Dennis spoke, his tone smooth but tightened at the edges. If you continue down this path, I will sue you, and I will win. The line clicked. Dennis had hung up first, as if that gave him the upper hand. Bill stared at the phone a moment longer, then exhaled slowly, steadying himself before calling Olivia to report the threat. She didn't respond with concern. She didn't respond with caution. She laughed. A short, sharp, almost amused sound. Let him threaten, she said. Empty threats are the first sign of panic. He knows the investigation is circling him, and he knows you're no longer under his control. Are we ready? Bill asked. We will be, Olivia replied. I'm assembling a forensic team. You gather every document you have, every email, every bank alert, every signature. We're going to build a wall he can't climb. When the call ended, Bill sat alone at his desk. But this time, the loneliness didn't feel like defeat. It felt like clarity, like the first quiet moment after a storm when a man realizes he's still standing. He organized documents into folders, made notes, printed statements. Every page he touched felt like reclaiming a piece of himself Dennis had tried to take. And somewhere deep within, he felt that spark again. Small, steady, growing. A flicker of power returning to a man who had nearly been stripped of everything. He wasn't naive. He knew the fight ahead would be long, brutal, and personal. But for the first time since the betrayal began, he was walking into it with open eyes and the beginnings of a plan. The storm was still coming, and Bill was finally preparing for it. Word of the frozen account spread faster than Bill expected. He wasn't the one talking, but Rebecca was. Within days, whispers began circulating through country club lunches, charity committees, and morning coffee groups. Women who once admired Rebecca now leaned in with polite concern as she crafted her version of the story. "Bill's not doing well," she'd say softly, hand pressed to her chest. "His memory, it's slipping. He's paranoid. He froze our accounts by mistake. I'm just trying to hold everything together." Mental decline, paranoia, instability. Words chosen carefully, designed to seed doubt. A narrative crafted by a woman who knew how to manipulate perception better than truth. And it worked, at least on the surface. People nodded sympathetically, unaware they were being fed a script. Bill heard about it through Harold first, then through neighbors who approached him with uncomfortable, pitying expressions. It stung more than he wanted to admit, but he refused to be baited. Olivia had warned him. When guilty people lose control, they rewrite reality. Let her talk. We'll counter with facts. And Olivia moved fast. 3 days after the smear campaign began, a thick envelope arrived at Dennis Crane's firm, delivered by courier, signed for personally. Olivia didn't just freeze accounts. She launched a legal assault with the precision of a surgeon. The notice accused Dennis of unethical conduct, demanded the release of all documents related to Bill's estate planning, and warned of pending civil action. Within an hour, Dennis tried calling Bill. Bill didn't answer. The next day, Michael stopped by the house carrying a laptop, and that determined look he got whenever he smelled wrongdoing. He spread his notes across the dining table and began explaining patterns he'd uncovered. "Dad, look at this," he said, pointing to a series of transactions on his screen. Dennis moved identical amounts out of another client's account last year, right before that client filed a complaint. And here, another senior client suddenly transferred assets into a holding company registered in Dennis's name. Bill leaned closer, jaw tightening as the pieces fell into place. "He's done this before." "Multiple times," Michael said. "He hides the theft behind legal jargon and psychological manipulation. You're not the first target, but you might be the last if we nail him." Bill felt anger rise, not the explosive kind, but the cold, steady kind that reshaped the spine of a man who had been bent too long. Later that week, Emma arrived at the house with a storm in her eyes. She didn't hug Bill. She went straight to Rebecca's old room where her stepmother was packing the last of her clothes into a sleek leather suitcase. "Mom," Emma said sharply, blocking the doorway, "I heard what you're telling people about Dad." Rebecca didn't look up. "I don't know what you mean." "Stop," Emma snapped. "You're lying about him. You're humiliating him publicly while you stay in a hotel with the man who stole his money." Rebecca straightened slowly, her expression suddenly cold and dangerous. "I'm doing what I must," she said. "Bill is spiraling, Emma. You're too naive to see it." "I'm not naive," Emma shot back, voice trembling with hurt and fury. "I'm your daughter, and I've watched you tear him apart piece by piece while pretending you're the victim. You need to stop slandering him." Rebecca zipped the suitcase, eyes flashing. "I don't owe you an explanation." And just like that, she pushed past Emma, walked down the stairs, and left the house without a backward glance. The door slammed. A car engine started, and the woman who had built a life with Bill for decades drove away, to Dennis, to the hotel they now shared, to the false future they thought they were constructing on the ruins of Bill's trust. The house was quiet after she left, too quiet. Bill sat in his study, staring at the window as dusk settled over the Virginia treetops. He didn't pretend he wasn't hurting. Betrayal from a spouse carried a weight nothing else could replicate. He grieved the marriage he thought he had, the woman he thought she was, the life he thought they'd built together. But beneath that grief, a firmer layer was forming, resolve. He wasn't collapsing, he wasn't losing his mind, and he wasn't giving them another inch. Rebecca and Dennis had expected him to crumble. They had expected a broken man, defeated, powerless, confused. Instead, Dennis received Olivia's legal notice, reviewed its contents, and felt something he hadn't expected. Pressure. A threat he couldn't control. A battle he hadn't prepared for. And as he poured himself a drink in his hotel suite beside Rebecca, staring at the thick legal envelope on the table, he realized with a cold, unsettling certainty. Bill Hargrove was not the weak man they thought he was. And the real fight was just beginning. The conference room in Olivia Mark's office had slowly transformed into a war room. 3 long tables pushed together, laptops open, binders stacked like fortifications, screens glowing with spreadsheets, timelines, and digital forensics. The air buzzed with quiet intensity, the kind that precedes a takedown. Bill sat at the head of the table, watching as Olivia's forensic team, 2 specialists in fraud examination and a former IRS investee, Gator, moved through his documents like surgeons, mapping the inside of a wound. "All right," said Marcia, the lead examiner, adjusting her glasses as she projected a set of documents onto the large screen. "This is the first signature we need to discuss." Bill leaned forward. It was his signature, but not. The letters were shaped right almost. The loops were too exaggerated, the pressure marks wrong, the slant inconsistent. Olivia pointed with a pen. "Look at the H in your last name. Yours always curves at the top. This one doesn't." Marcia clicked to the next page, another signature and another, then several more. "All forged," she said plainly. "Someone spent time practicing your handwriting, but they rushed on the final documents." Bill felt a cold wave wash down his spine. He didn't flinch, didn't rage, didn't crumble. He just nodded once. "Dennis." Marcia continued. "What's more troubling is that these forged signatures appear exclusively on documents connected to asset extraction, nothing on routine paperwork. This was targeted." A map of his financial accounts filled the screen, arrows, transfers, timestamps, overlapping movements that created a lattice of theft. Olivia crossed her arms. "This wasn't sloppy, Bill. It was methodical. Crane wanted to bleed you dry without you noticing until it was too late." "And he would have," Marcia added, "if your accounts hadn't been frozen." But the real punch came next. The team projected a chain of emails recovered from Rebecca's laptop, obtained legally through account access Bill still technically owned. Bill watched the screen without blinking as Rebecca's name appeared line after line. "Dennis says we need to push Bill harder. He's starting to resist. We need to accelerate the transfers. Should I tell him the market is unstable again? He'll fold, he always folds." Michael, sitting beside Bill, cursed under his breath. She was part of this the whole time, not manipulated, not confused, completely in it. Bill didn't say a word. His fingers tightened slightly on the arm of the chair, but his face remained calm, almost disturbingly calm. The next set of documents hit even harder. Michael stood and walked to the screen. "Look at this," he said, voice steady but laced with anger. "Dad, Dennis didn't just use your accounts. He used your money to settle part of another lawsuit." He zoomed in on a transaction. $320,000 withdrawn from one of Bill's portfolios. The funds were funneled into a shell corporation, then transferred again to a legal defense account tied to another case Dennis had been involved in, a malpractice claim he had quietly settled 6 months earlier. Bill stared at the number. The theft wasn't just personal. It was calculated survival at his expense. Olivia stepped forward. "This is powerful evidence. It shows motive, pattern, intent." Michael added, "He used Dad like an ATM, and Mom helped him do it." Silence settled into the room, a heavy electric quiet. Bill finally inhaled slowly. "Then we proceed." Olivia nodded. "Yes, we proceed. I'll file a full civil action, fraud, conspiracy, exploitation, breach of fiduciary duty. Once the judge sees this, Dennis will scramble. Rebecca will crumble. She turned to her team. Prepare the full packet. Timelines, signatures, emails, financial trails, everything. The team dispersed, gathering documents, organizing files, moving with the urgency of people preparing to drop a bomb. Michael sat back down, looking at his father. "Dad, are you all right?" Bill didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the projection, on the evidence of the people who had gutted him without hesitation. His face was carved into stillness, grief beneath steel, heartbreak beneath precision. "I'm all right," he said finally, voice low but steady. "I'm not angry anymore, I'm focused." Michael nodded slowly. He recognized the tone. It was the same voice Bill used decades ago when he rebuilt his contracting company after the recession, a voice that meant something unbreakable had set in. Olivia returned with a stack of folders, dropping them in front of Bill with a soft thud. "This is the beginning of your counterstrike, but be prepared. When Dennis realizes what's coming, he'll lash out. He'll fight dirty." Bill placed a hand on the folders, feeling the weight of them, not just in paper but in meaning. "I expect him to," he said. Michael added quietly, "He's dangerous, Dad." Bill looked at his son, then back at the evidence of betrayal spread across the table. "So am I," he said. There was no bravado in the statement, no performance. Just a truth, awakening in a man who had been pushed too far. Olivia gave a thin, satisfied smile. "Then let's draw blood." And as the room vibrated with the tension of what was about to unfold, Bill felt it. The shift. The moment before the next strike. The exact second he realized. The fight was no longer about survival. It was about justice. And the next mover would cut deep. The call came early, so RLY that Bill assumed it was another telemarketer. He almost let it ring out, but something in his gut nudged him, the same instinct that had kept him alive through decades of business storms. He answered. "Mr. Hargrove," a voice said, formal, cautious, almost reverent. "This is senior banker Laura Jennings from First Dominion's Legacy Division." Legacy Division. Bill didn't even know such a department existed. "Yes, this is Bill," he said slowly. "What can I do for you?" "We've completed the full audit on the 1948 trust you inquired about." She paused, as if steadying herself. "Mr. Hargrove, I think you should sit." Bill did, lowering himself into the old leather chair in his study. "The trust," Laura continued, "has been active, uninterrupted, through 9 bank mergers. The growth compounding over more than 70 years has resulted in a present valuation of," she hesitated only a second, $11,632,000. Bill closed his eyes. For a moment, the world around him went very still. 11.6 million, he repeated, barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir, and I want to be clear. The documents confirm you as the sole beneficiary. No co-owners, no secondary parties, no spousal attachments. The structure predates modern marital property laws. It cannot be accessed, claimed, or viewed by anyone except you." Bill breathed in slowly, letting the reality settle into him like warmth after months of cold. Rebecca couldn't touch it. Dennis couldn't reach it. No forged signature, no fraudulent clause, no pressure campaign could alter this. A legacy his grandfather built when the world was recovering from war had become the one thing standing between Bill and financial devastation. When the call ended, Bill remained still for several long moments, staring at the window as morning light crept across the floor. $11 million, protected by a legal system older than the people trying to rob him. For the first time in weeks, something inside him lifted, not triumph, not joy, but something deeper. Stability, safety, independence. By noon, the rumor mill had already begun to churn through circles Dennis Crane could not control. Word spread that Bill had found something, a resource, a fund, a lifeline Dennis hadn't planned for. Dennis heard the whispers from a junior associate in his firm. He shut his office door, pacing like a trapped animal, the calm, lawyerly veneer stripped away. Rumors weren't facts, but they were threats. And in Dennis's world, anything unknown was dangerous. He dialed Rebecca instantly. "What did you tell him?" he demanded. "What did he find?" Rebecca, sitting in the hotel room they now shared, looked startled. "Nothing. I don't know what you mean." "There's talk at the bank," Dennis snapped. "Something big, something he didn't know he had." Rebecca froze. "But that's impossible. We had access to everything." "No," Dennis hissed. "We had access to everything he let us see." Panic flickered in his eyes. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered. Not by the man he'd spent months undermining. Not by the victim he'd assumed was weak. That afternoon, Rebecca drove back to the house. Bill saw her car pull into the driveway from his study window. He didn't move at first. He simply watched her sit in the car for nearly a minute, gathering herself, practicing whatever speech she'd rehearsed. When she finally stepped inside, her voice was soft, too soft. "Bill, can we talk?" He didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch until she grew visibly uncomfortable. She moved closer. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about us, about everything." Her eyes glistened with a manufactured sheen of emotion. "I made mistakes. I let Dennis influence me. He twisted things. I was overwhelmed and I didn't see clearly." "Rebecca," Bill interrupted, voice level, calm, immovable, "don't rewrite history." Her breath hitched. "I'm trying to apologize." "You're trying to come back because you're losing." That hit her like a slap. Her expression cracked, guilt, anger, desperation flickering across her face in rapid succession. "Bill, we've spent 20 years together." "And you threw them away," he said. Not harsh, not loud, just final. "You already chose your side." Rebecca swallowed, but the words didn't come. Not because she didn't have lies prepared, but because he wasn't giving her a place to put them. She stepped back as if pushed by a force she couldn't fight. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "No," Bill said quietly. "For the first time, I won't." She left without another word. When the house fell silent again, Bill returned to his desk, not shaken, not wounded, but resolved. He called Laura Jennings at the bank. "I'd like to transfer the trust into a secure private account," he said, "completely detached from any joint access." "We can arrange that immediately," she replied. By the end of the day, every dollar of the 1948 trust sat in an untouchable vault of Protect. Tian, away from Dennis's reach, beyond Rebecca's lies, shielded by legal architecture older than either of them. Bill leaned back, exhaling slowly. For weeks he had been the prey. Now, for the first time, he held leverage they didn't even know the size of. And the war was about to change. Because Bill Hargrove finally had a weapon of his own. The hotel suite that once felt like an escape now felt like a pressure cooker. Rebecca stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the late afternoon traffic crawl across the Richmond skyline. Behind her, Dennis paced, agitated, sweat beading along his hairline despite the cool air conditioning. "You're not listening," Rebecca snapped, her voice tight, sharp. "Bill isn't collapsing. He's fighting back, freezing accounts, hiring attorneys, digging into things we had under control." Dennis cut her off. "Because you opened your mouth to the wrong people." He pointed at her accusingly. "Someone told him to look into that old trust. Someone told him he had options." "I didn't tell him anything," Rebecca shot back. "He never trusted me enough to talk to me these last few days." "Good," Dennis muttered. "The less he talks to you, the fewer mistakes you'll make." She stiffened. "I'm not the problem here, Dennis, you are." Dennis laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You think this is about blame. This is about survival. If we don't get ahead of what he's doing, we're both finished." Rebecca turned toward him fully now, eyes burning. He found something big. I saw it in his face. And you're losing control." "I'm not losing anything," he growled, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "I just need you to stay quiet, stay loyal, stop panicking." Her jaw dropped. "Loyal," she let out a breathless, shocked laugh. "Is that what this was? Loyalty? I left my husband for you. I destroyed my marriage for you. I lied for you. And now you're treating me like some pawn you can move around when it suits you." Dennis stepped closer, eyes hardening. "That's exactly what you are if you don't stay in line." Rebecca froze. For months she had convinced herself Dennis loved her, or at least valued her. But now, standing this close, she finally saw what had been hiding behind his charming smile. A user. A manipulator. A man who devoured whatever stood in front of him and threw away the rest. "You were using me," she whispered, "from the beginning." "Don't be dramatic," Dennis scoffed. "We were using each other. You wanted out of that old man's shadow. You wanted the money without the work. And you wanted access to his accounts," she finished, voice trembling. Dennis didn't deny it. Instead, he tightened his tie and walked away from her, as if the conversation had become inconvenient. Rebecca felt something break inside her, something small but vital. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking, and stormed toward the door. "Where are you going?" Dennis demanded. "To get air," she said, voice sharp, "before you accuse me of something else." "Don't talk to him," Dennis warned. "Don't call him, don't go near the house." She didn't answer. She slammed the door behind her. But when she got outside, standing in the cold breeze, her phone buzzed. Bill's name, still saved in her favorites, appeared on the screen. For a moment she considered calling him, apologizing, trying to salvage something. Instead she dialed. But Bill didn't answer. He didn't even let it ring through fully, straight to voicemail. Rebecca tried again, and again. Each time the rejection cut deeper, revealing a truth she had never wanted to admit. Without Bill's fortune, she was nothing. Meanwhile, Bill sat at Olivia's office, reviewing documents with a calmness that came from clarity, not detachment. He saw Rebecca's name flash across his phone screen, but he flipped it face down without hesitation. "Don't let her back in," Olivia advised quietly. "This is when people like her suddenly become apologetic." "I know," Bill said, and he did. His focus stayed on the thick binder Olivia pushed toward him. "These are witness statements. Former clients of Dennis Crane who experienced similar manipulation, shifted accounts, recommended transfers, pressure to sign papers they didn't understand." Bill scanned the pages. Elderly couples, a widower, a retired teacher. Each one told the same story. "He's been doing this for years," Olivia said. "Your case might be the one that finally exposes him." At that moment, Detective Lisa Carver entered the conference room, her expression grim but energized. "We've confirmed fraudulent behavior in 2 more of Crane's clients," she said. "And one of them is ready to testify. We're building something strong." Bill nodded slowly. The pieces were lining up: truth, evidence, patterns, and they were forming a picture that would bury Dennis this time. Back at the hotel, Rebecca returned to the suite to find Dennis sitting in the dark, the glow of his laptop casting harsh shadows across his face. He looked up at her, not with affection, not with apology, but with calculation. "Where were you?" he asked. "Not with Bill," she replied, her tone defiant. "He won't even take my calls." Dennis remained silent. Rebecca sank onto the edge of the couch, feeling the walls closing around her. Her old life, built on security and reputation, was slipping through her fingers like sand. And the man she'd thrown everything away for, he was cracking under pressure, turning on her and losing the war. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the floor as if it might offer answers. It didn't. Because deep down, she finally understood. Without Bill's money, and without Bill's forgiveness, she had nothing left to stand on. And for the first time since the betrayal began, She felt genuinely afraid. The air inside Olivia Mark's office had the gravity of a launching pad, quiet, focused, lethal. Stacks of evidence lined her desk like ammunition. Bill sat across from her, hands folded, expression steady as she reviewed the final document. "This," Olivia said, sliding the papers toward him, "is the civil suit. Fraud, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty, elder financial exploitation. We're filing against Dennis Crane and Rebecca." Bill didn't flinch at the last name. He nodded once. "Do it." Olivia signed her portion with a crisp stroke, then passed the pen to him. Bill read every line slowly, deliberately, before adding his signature. When he set the pen down, something shifted in the air. A quiet threshold crossed. By noon, the lawsuit was filed with the Richmond Circuit Court. And by evening, Dennis's entire firm knew. The response was immediate. Emails ignored, phones unanswered. Partners who once bragged about Dennis's courtroom victories now held strategy meetings without him. Associates who used to admire him passed him in the hall with stiff nods, eyes lowered. In the conference room, where Dennis once held court, the senior partners sat with folded arms and tense jaws as he attempted to defend himself. "This is a misunderstanding," Dennis insisted, pacing like a trapped animal. "Bill doesn't know what he's talking about. His wife." One partner cut him off. "His ex-wife, and she's named in the suit, too." Another added, "Your actions expose the entire firm to liability. Until this is resolved, you're relieved of all client responsibilities." Dennis's eyes widened, fury and disbelief clashing. "You can't sideline me. I built half of the client base here." "And now you're a threat to it," the managing partner said flatly. Dennis walked out of the room shaking, his composure cracking for the first time. Across the city, Rebecca was feeling her own collapse, quietly, painfully, one hotel invoice at a time. What began as a temporary stay had become an expensive exile. The longer she remained away from the house, the faster her savings bled out. Every night she checked her credit card balance with mounting dread. Every morning she hoped Dennis would offer reassurance, some plan, some guarantee. But all he offered now were short, irritated replies and hours locked behind his laptop. The relationship that once felt intoxicating had become a cage of stress and financial fear. Meanwhile, Bill stayed silent. He didn't respond to Rebecca's emails. He didn't acknowledge Dennis's panicked texts. He didn't gloat. He didn't retaliate. He simply watched from a quiet distance as the mechanisms Olivia set in motion began grinding forward with cold precision. The depositions started 2 weeks later. Bill arrived with Michael beside him, a united front that neither Dennis nor Rebecca had prepared for. Michael wasn't just a son, he was a shield, calm, analytical, unwavering. In the deposition room, Dennis sat across from them, pale, jaw tight. His lawyer, a man who clearly did not want to be there, kept shifting nervously in his seat. Rebecca sat beside Dennis, though hours earlier she had begged him not to make her testify. Olivia operated like a tactician, her voice sharp but controlled as she walked through the timeline of forged signatures, manipulated transfers, and incriminating emails. Each piece of evidence landed with a quiet, devastating thud. Dennis grew more agitated with every question. "I advised him based on financial best practices," he argued. "You forged his signature," Olivia countered, sliding a comparison across the table. That isn't, you can't prove." "We already have," Olivia said, voice unshakable. Rebecca tried to interrupt. "Bill, please." Olivia raised a hand without looking at her. "Ms. Hargrove, you'll have your turn." Rebecca's mouth snapped shut. When the deposition ended, Dennis nearly knocked over his chair in his rush to leave. He muttered something to Rebecca under his breath, but she stayed behind for a moment, eyes meeting Bill's with a look that was part red, part fear. Bill offered nothing in return, No sympathy, no anger, just silence. Outside the conference room, Michael placed a steady hand on Bill's shoulder. "You did good, Dad." Bill nodded, but he wasn't celebrating. The victory wasn't won. The courtroom still awaited, and he knew Dennis was dangerous, most dangerous when cornered. And Dennis was cornered now. Later that night, as Bill sat alone in his study reviewing one final stack of documents Olivia had given him, he felt the weight of what lay ahead. The cross-examinations, the scrutiny, the retaliation Dennis would attempt. But beneath that weight was something stronger. Readiness. The kind that came from truth, preparation, and the quiet power of knowing he finally had leverage. Bill closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, the house silent around him. The lawsuit had been fired like a starting pistol. The battle was moving into the courtroom. And the next phase, he knew, would draw blood. The courtroom felt colder than it should have, marble floors, tall ceilings, and a heavy stillness that pressed down on everyone inside. Bill sat at the plaintiff's table beside Olivia, hands folded, posture calm. He wore a navy suit he hadn't worn since his retirement dinner years ago. It fit looser now, but his presence inside it felt stronger than it had in months. Across the aisle, Dennis Crane adjusted his tie for the 5th time, refusing to look in Bill's direction. His lawyer whispered something urgently, but Dennis's jaw was locked, eyes sharp and desperate. Rebecca sat beside him, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were bone white. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered, stern, gray-haired, a man known for his intolerance of theatrics. Olivia stood. "Your Honor, we're here today to address fraud, exploitation, and conspiracy involving the unauthorized liquidation of my client's assets." Dennis rose quickly, his voice polished, slick. "Your Honor, before we dive into exaggerated claims, we need to address a critical issue. Mr. Hargrove's memory has been in decline for some time. His confusion around financial decisions is well documented." Olivia did not even flinch. "Documented by whom?" she asked sharply. Dennis hesitated. Olivia continued, "By himself. No, by his wife, who is a co-defendant in this case, and by you, the attorney, benefiting from the supposed confusion." Dennis tried to maintain his composure. "I have acted only with my client's best interests in mind." Olivia stepped forward, her tone crisp. "Then let's examine those interests." She approached the evidence screen and tapped a button. A document appeared, one of the extraction forms bearing Bill's forged signature. "Your Honor, this signature was used to liquidate over $8 million of my client's assets. A forensic handwriting expert has confirmed it is not his signature." She clicked again. Another document flashed on screen. Rebecca's email to Dennis. "He's pushing back. Should I tell him the market is unstable again?" Rebecca flinched visibly. Dennis muttered something under his breath. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Hargrove, is this your email?" Rebecca's voice trembled. I don't remember writing." Olivia cut in. "Timestamped, verified through her own cloud backup." Rebecca's shoulders slumped. Dennis stood abruptly. "Your Honor, the context." "No," Olivia snapped. "Let's address context." She displayed another document, Dennis's confidential note to himself, recovered during discovery. "Push for liquidation before he gets help. R is useful leverage." The courtroom gasped softly. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Crane, explain this." Dennis swallowed. "It's taken out of context. These were strategic notes." "For whose benefit?" Olivia asked. "Certainly not Mr. Hargrove's." Bill sat silent, steady. He didn't glare, didn't smirk, didn't even look triumphant. He simply existed in the truth, a man no longer hiding from humiliation. Dennis tried to shift tactics. "Your Honor, Mr. Hargrove has been confused, forgetful. His son and daughter have been influencing him." Michael leaned forward, but Olivia held up a hand. "Let's test that theory," she said. She displayed a bank timestamp. This shows Mr. Hargrove logging in at 6:12 a.m. to review his accounts, the morning he discovered the unauthorized liquidation. And here, she clicked, is the email Dennis sent the night before, advising Rebecca to keep him distracted. The judge frowned. "Mr. Crane, this does not reflect ethical representation." Dennis's face turned a shade lighter. Rebecca's breathing grew shallow, her composure collapsing inch by inch as Olivia continued. "These emails, transfers, and forged signatures show a coordinated effort to strip Mr. Hargrove of financial control. And when he questioned these actions, instead of transparency, he was gaslit." Olivia turned toward Bill. "Mr. Hargrove, did you ever authorize these transactions?" Bill rose slowly, his voice was steady. "No, yo. Honor, not one." The simplicity of his answer echoed louder than any speech Dennis could have prepared. The judge looked at Dennis. "You attempted to present this man as incompetent, yet the evidence shows a man who repeatedly sought clarity while you and your co-defendant obscured it." Dennis's lawyer rubbed his temples. Dennis tried one last time. "Your Honor, Mr. Hargrove is making emotional decisions. He's—" "Enough," the judge snapped. "Sit down." Dennis sat, defeated, sweat glistening at his hairline. The judge turned to Olivia. "You may proceed with your formal motion." Olivia inclined her head respectfully. "We request restitution, full access to all financial records, and protective oversight until every asset is accounted for." The judge nodded. "I find grounds to move forward, strong grounds." Rebecca finally broke. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not the performative kind, but the kind born of panic. She turned toward Bill, mouthing, "I'm sorry." Bill didn't look at her, not out of cruelty, out of closure. Michael watched him, a slow, proud breath leaving his chest. He saw the man he grew up idolizing, the steady father, the builder, the survivor, reclaiming something priceless. His dignity, his voice, his place in the truth. The tide had shifted, unmistakably, irrevocably. And Dennis Crane knew it. The judge spoke again, voice firm. "Court will reconvene after reviewing the next submission. Counsel, prepare accordingly." As the gavel struck, Bill felt it, not victory, not yet, but momentum. And the next phase would push everything even further into the light. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, crisp and cold, with frost still clinging to the edges of Bill's windows. He was finishing his coffee when his phone buzzed, first a text from Michael, then a call from Olivia, then another from Detective Carver. He answered Carver's call. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, a hint of satisfaction threading her normally measured voice, "you'll want to turn on Channel 4. Bill clicked the TV remote. The broadcast snapped into focus, the courthouse steps filled with flashing cameras and murmuring reporters. And in the middle of it, handcuffed, disheveled, eyes frantic, was Dennis Crane. Detective Carver's team flanked him as he was pushed toward the patrol car. "Dennis Crane has been arrested on multiple counts of financial fraud involving senior clients," the anchor announced. "These charges predate the Hargrove case but were confirmed during the broader investigation." Bill didn't smile. He didn't exhale in triumph. He simply watched, steady and still, as the man who had dismantled his life was finally dragged into the daylight. The camera zoomed in. Dennis thrashed against the officers, shouting, "This wasn't all me. She forced me, she used me. Rebecca pushed for the transfers. Ask her, ask her." Reporters swarmed, mics thrust forward, capturing every desperate word. Rebecca's name hit the air like a grenade. Bill muted the television, but Detective Carver's voice filled the silence. "He's panicking, throwing anyone he can under the bus." "Expected," Bill said. "And predictable," Carver added. "I'll keep you updated." When he hung up, Bill stared at the frozen image on the television. Dennis's face twisted in desperation. his expensive suit wrinkled, his confidence shattered. The collapse had begun. Hours later, news spread across Richmond's social circles at record speed. Rebecca's friends, women she once charmed with curated poise and designer smiles, began to distance themselves with surgical precision. A few unfollowed her online. Others sent cold, clipped messages. Several simply vanished, the way people do when scandal becomes contagious. At the Lakeside Country Club, where Rebecca used to hold court during charity brunches, the whispers grew thick enough to suffocate. "Did you hear? She knew. She was part of it. I always thought something was off with that lawyer. They deserve each other." By afternoon, Rebecca sat alone in the hotel room she once described as temporary luxury, staring at the TV replay of Dennis's arrest. Each time he shouted her name, her face drained a little more. She grabbed her phone, dialing him repeatedly. Each call went straight to a generic correctional facility voicemail. Then she tried Bill. For the fourth time in 48 hours. He didn't answer. Meanwhile, Olivia moved with ruthless efficiency. She and her paralegal team filed emergency motions with the court to seize any assets Dennis had purchased using Bill's stolen funds. A condo he secretly owned, 2 vehicles, a luxury boat registered under a shell firm, even a high-end watch collection. "Everything he bought with your money," Olivia said, sliding a list across the table, "will be frozen or repossessed. He won't be able to pawn a single silver cufflink." Bill nodded. "Good." "It's more than good," Olivia corrected. "It's decisive." By the next morning, the sheriff's office had begun seizing property. Footage surfaced online of repossession crews towing Dennis's prized Mercedes from the garage of his condo building. Officers removed boxes from his office, documents, personal items, the last fragments of the image he once cultivated. Bill watched the clips with an unsettling sense of clarity. There was no joy, no satisfaction, just a recognition that justice, once slow and distant, was finally stepping into focus. Later that afternoon, Rebecca's world continued its freefall. The hotel manager knocked on her door, informing her, politely but firmly, that her credit card had been declined. Twice. Her savings account had dipped below the minimum to support extended stay charges. She had nowhere to go, no income to rely on, and no lifeline left to grasp. She sat on the edge of the bed, trembling, gripping her phone like a lifeline. She didn't know where to turn. And Bill finally felt nothing for her. Just distance. Just truth. That evening, he drove home as the sky turned a deep autumn red. The trees along the road swayed in the chill wind, the same wind that once carried betrayal to his doorstep and was now sweeping it away. He sat at his desk, reviewing the last phase of Olivia's preparations: court filings, restitution calculations, asset recovery strategies. Each document was a brick in the fortress he was building around his life, around his legacy. And when he finished reading them, he closed the final folder with a calm, deliberate motion. Dennis was collapsing. Rebecca was unraveling. Their alliance was dying in real time. And Bill was ready. The final strike was coming. And this time, he would not hold back. The courtroom felt different this time, not colder, not louder, just charged, as if everyone inside could sense that whatever unfolded today would decide everything. Bill sat beside Olivia, steady, composed, almost unnervingly calm. Michael was behind him, a quiet wall of support. Across the aisle, Dennis looked like a man held together by frayed threads, hair unkempt, eyes darting, suit wrinkled. Rebecca sat next to him, pale as chalk, her hands trembling in her lap. She hadn't slept. It was written all over her. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge entered, his face stern and tired from weeks of unraveling chaos. Olivia rose. Your Honor, the plaintiff will present additional evidence discovered during the financial audit. Dennis's attorney opened his mouth to object, but Olivia continued without giving him room to breathe. We've uncovered a transfer plan, a strategic, concealed process orchestrated by Dennis Crane to move Mr. Hargrove's liquidated $8 million into an offshore holding account under Rebecca Hargrove's name. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Even the judge leaned forward. Bill didn't move. Rebecca's head snapped toward Dennis, eyes wide with disbelief, or perhaps fear that her last remaining secret was finally dragging itself into the light. The judge looked to Olivia. "Do you have documentation?" She clicked a button on her laptop, projecting files on the courtroom screen. They were detailed, time-stamped, damning. Dennis's offshore instructions. Routing details to a bank in the Caymans. A folder labeled RH Primary Access. Your Honor, Olivia said clearly, the $8 million wasn't being redistributed. It was being stolen permanently, hidden offshore under the co-conspirator's identity. Dennis shot up from his seat. This is slander. These documents were part of a hypothetical restructuring, not final, not executed. Olivia raised a hand calmly. The emails attached show otherwise. Another tap. Emails appeared. Dennis writing, "Once the transfer clears, she'll have full control. Bill won't realize until probate." Rebecca writing back, "Will it look legal if he questions it? I don't want him suspecting anything yet." Rebecca's face collapsed. Tears slid down her cheeks as her entire world, the lies she'd told, the life she'd tried to escape into, turned to ash. "Your Honor," she whispered, I did." But Olivia wasn't done. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said sharply, "you were aware of the offshore plan, correct?" Rebecca covered her face. "I knew part of it," she cried. "I knew he was moving something, but Dennis said it was legal. I didn't know." "You knew the intent," Olivia cut in. "You participated in discussions. You approved the beneficiary changes. You encouraged further pressure on Mr. Hargrove." Rebecca turned toward Bill, sobbing now. "Bill, please, you have to believe me. Please don't destroy me. I made terrible choices, but I didn't mean to." Bill rose slowly. Every eye in the courtroom turned to him. He didn't shout. He didn't tremble. He simply looked at her with a calm that carried years of love and every wound she had carved into him. "You destroyed us first," he said quietly. Rebecca broke completely, her sob echoing in the stunned courtroom air. The judge lifted his gavel. "Order." Dennis tried one last time to salvage control. "Your Honor, my client." The judge cut him off sharply. "Your client has demonstrated a pattern of deceit, manipulation, and exploitation. If you speak again without being addressed, I will hold you in contempt." Dennis sank back into his chair, defeated. Olivia stepped forward with her next motion. "Your Honor, given the evidence presented, financial manipulation, conspiracy, and fraudulent activity, we formally request full restitution rights for Mr. Hargrove." The judge didn't take long. "Granted." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Rebecca gasped, covering her mouth. Dennis stared into nothing. The judge continued, "Furthermore, the court finds Mrs. Rebecca Hargrove partially liable for conspiracy and participation in fraudulent asset movement." Rebecca's shoulders crumpled, as if the words themselves had weight. "And Mr. Crane," the judge added, turning with visible disdain, "your behavior violates the ethical responsibilities of your profession. The court will forward all evidence to the state bar for disciplinary action, alongside Detective Carver's ongoing criminal investigation." Dennis shut his eyes. His world, his career, his freedom, his arrogance was collapsing. Olivia wasn't finished. "One final clarification, Your Honor," she said, voice steady. "The defendant's attempts to bankrupt Mr. Hargrove ultimately failed. Because Mr. Hargrove has access to assets protected under pre-modern trust law. She displayed the document. The 1948 trust, William Hargrove, sole beneficiary. The courtroom gasped again. Dennis's mouth fell open. Rebecca stared, stunned, broken. It was the first moment she realized Bill had not been helpless, not broken, not dependent, not ruined. She had underestimated him entirely. She whispered, "You had money all this time." Bill looked at her, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with a clarity she had never granted him. "My grandfather protected me," he said, "even when you didn't." Rebecca sobbed harder, shaking uncontrollably. The judge adjourned, the gavel striking with finality. As the courtroom emptied, Michael placed a hand on Bill's back. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. "You got your life back." Bill exhaled slowly, not in relief but in quiet readiness. Because this chapter was ending. But the resolution, the true end, was still ahead. And he was walking toward it with steady, unbroken steps. The court order arrived on a rainy Thursday morning, delivered by courier in a thick envelope stamped with the judge's seal. Bill slid it open with an old letter opener, one his grandfather had owned, then read each sentence twice to make sure he wasn't imagining it. "Mr. Hargrove," Olivia said over the phone, her voice crisp with satisfaction, "the judge granted you full authority to freeze all marital assets tied to Rebecca. Checking, savings, investments, anything under her name or joint control." Bill exhaled slowly. Not triumph, not vengeance, just a deep, steady release of air, as if a weight he had been dragging for months finally loosened. "What do we freeze first?" he asked. "Everything," Olivia replied. "She doesn't get to weaponize the life you built." By noon, the orders were executed. The financial world moved fast when a judge's signature was involved. Rebecca, sitting alone in her diminishing hotel room, opened her banking app and stared at the red warning banners. "Account restricted. Contact financial institution." Her breath quickened. She tried another account. "Restricted." Another. "Restricted." Her last lifeline had snapped. Across town, Dennis's unraveling reached its next stage. A sheriff's deputy served him with a seizure list at the detention facility. His condo, his luxury boat, his sports car, everything purchased with stolen money, was marked for immediate liquidation. 3 days later, auctioneers stood in his parking garage, tagging vehicles. Bidders circled like vultures. His possessions, once symbols of success, became items on a clearance list. Bill didn't attend the auction. He didn't need to. Watching from a distance was enough. He saw the photos online later. Dennis's Mercedes loaded onto a flatbed truck, his boat wrapped for transport, his designer watches photographed like museum pieces stripped of value. The man who tried to bury him was now being unmade, one asset at a time. Meanwhile, Bill finally stepped into the next chapter, reconstruction. He met Olivia at her office, where she spread folders across a conference table. "You've been focused on survival," she said. "Now we rebuild, carefully, strategically." She outlined new investments, secured funds, conservative growth plans. Nothing risky, nothing exposed. They worked for hours, calculating, reviewing, rebuilding brick by brick. When they finished, she leaned back. "You're in a stronger position than you were before the betrayal." Bill nodded, "Not just financially." She offered a small smile. "That's the real victory." That evening, Michael arrived with a laptop tucked under his arm and the determined expression of a man on a mission. "We're securing everything," he announced as he walked into the study. "Your email, your banking portals, your cloud accounts, even your Wi-Fi. Dennis manipulated access once. We're making sure nobody can ever do that again." For the next 3 hours, Michael worked with the intensity of a surgeon. He ran cybersecurity audits, installed encrypted password vaults, reset devices, and traced every suspicious login attempt. "Dad," he said finally, closing the laptop with a soft click, "you're covered. No one's getting into anything without going through me." Bill rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "Thank you." Michael shook his head. "You shouldn't have had to fight this alone." Later that week, Emma visited. She brought dinner, simple, homemade, warm, and insisted Bill sit outside with her on the back porch. The evening air was crisp, the kind that carried hints of approaching fall. "You look lighter," she said gently. "Do I?" Bill asked. Emma nodded. "You've been in survival mode for so long. It's good to see you breathing again." He let out a quiet laugh, his first genuine one in months. "I didn't realize how much of myself I lost during all this." "Not lost," she said, "just buried, and you're uncovering it piece by piece." They sat in quiet companionship, the kind only a father and daughter share, steady, grounding, healing. But the moment that signaled a true shift came a week later. Bill drove to the industrial district, past warehouses, shipping lots, and the old building where his contracting firm had once operated. He stepped into the office of its new owners, greeted by a manager who recognized his name instantly. "You're William Hargrove," the man said, shaking his hand with respect. "Your company built this town's backbone." Bill smiled softly. "I'd like to buy back a portion, not to run it, just to close the loop." The purchase was modest, symbolic, but as he signed the papers, something inside him clicked into place. A chapter he'd believed was long over finally received its proper ending. When he left the building, he stood in the sunlight for a long moment, feeling not triumphant, but whole. That night, as Bill sat on his back porch again, watching the horizon turn gold, he realized something profound. Peace wasn't a sudden arrival. It was a slow return. A cautious visitor. A quiet companion. And it was finally coming back to him. Piece by piece. Day by day. Breath by breath. He wasn't the same man he had been before the betrayal. He was stronger, sharper, more certain of the boundaries he would never again allow anyone to cross. And though the story wasn't finished yet, for the first time in a long time, Bill felt the ground under him steady. The message came through unexpectedly, a short, trembling voicemail from Rebecca, her voice hollow and stripped of its old confidence. "Bill, please, I need to see you just once, please." Bill listened only once. Then he forwarded the message to Olivia, who responded within minutes. "If you agree to meet her," she warned, "do it in public. No private spaces, no vulnerability. This is the moment people try to rewrite history." Bill nodded to himself, understood. He chose a quiet cafe off Main Street, public enough to be safe, neutral enough to avoid theatrics. He arrived early, choosing a table near the window where anyone walking by could see him. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes late, her steps hesitant, her shoulders hunched. She looked smaller than he remembered, worn down by stress, guilt, and the unraveling of every lie she had lived behind. When she saw him, her breath broke, and she approached with trembling hands. "Bill," she whispered, sliding into the seat across from him, "thank you for agreeing to this." He didn't smile, he didn't glare, his face was calm, unreadable. "What did you want to say?" Rebecca exhaled shakily, leaning forward. "I made mistakes," she began. "I know that. I know what I did was unforgivable. But Dennis, he manipulated me. He promised things. He twisted everything. He destroyed my life." Bill didn't respond right away. He let her words fall into the space between them like loose stones, heavy, scattered, incomplete. Rebecca swallowed hard. "I've lost everything, Bill. My friends won't speak to me. My accounts are frozen. Dennis is in jail and blaming me for everything. I have nowhere to go." Her voice cracked. "Please, can we try again? Just start over. I know I can earn back your trust." Bill looked at her the way a man looks at a photograph of a life that no longer exists. "Rebecca," he said gently, "Dennis didn't destroy you." She blinked, confused. "You destroyed yourself." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. "You chose him," Bill continued quietly. "You chose lies, you chose money over honesty. You stood beside him while he stole from me. You gaslit me. You humiliated me. And you did all of it willingly." Rebecca's eyes filled instantly, tears sliding down her cheeks, thick and fast. I didn't know how far it would go, I thought." "You thought I'd never fight back," Bill said, his voice calm but unshakably firm. "You thought I'd crumble, but I didn't. And now you're facing the consequences of your own decisions." She reached for his hand instinctively, but he pulled his away. Her breath caught in her throat. "Please," she whispered, "please don't leave me like this." Bill didn't raise his voice. He didn't let anger speak for him. He simply said, "I already left, Rebecca, the moment you betrayed me." He stood up slowly, offering her a small, respectful nod. Nothing more, nothing less. Rebecca couldn't stand. She stayed in her chair, hunched forward, shaking as sobs overtook her. People at nearby tables pretended not to watch, but their glances betrayed them. For the first time, Rebecca Hargrove was truly alone. Bill stepped out into the cool afternoon air and closed the door behind him. And with that simple motion, quiet, deliberate, he closed the chapter that had haunted him for nearly a year. An hour later, he met with Olivia to sign the final divorce documents. No hesitation, no conflict. His hand didn't shake. When the last page was complete, she looked at him with professional pride. "You did the hard thing," she said softly. "I did the right thing," Bill replied. That evening, Michael and Emma insisted on taking him out for dinner, not a celebration of victory, but of freedom. They chose a modest riverside restaurant with warm lighting and soft music. For the first time in months, Bill felt lighter at the dinner table, his shoulders unburdened, his chest no longer tight. Michael raised his glass. "To Dad," he said, "for surviving hell and walking out stronger." Emma smiled through glassy eyes. "To new beginnings." Bill lifted his own glass, feeling emotion rise unexpectedly in his throat. Not grief, not anger. Relief. Real, profound relief. As the night unfolded, laughing, telling stories, eating without dread, Bill realized something he hadn't dared believe until now. He was free. Free from manipulation. Free from betrayal. Free from the quiet destruction that had lived in his home for years. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he allowed himself to breathe. Fully, deeply, without fear of what came next. The gravel path leading to the old Hargrove family cabin felt different than Bill remembered. Quieter, softer, almost reverent. The trees arched overhead in a protective canopy, their branches whispering in the late autumn wind. The cabin itself stood at the edge of a clearing, weathered but dignified, its wooden walls carrying the weight of nearly a century of memories. Bill parked the truck and stepped out, breathing in the sharp, earthy air. This place had been untouched for decades. His grandfather's handwriting was still carved faintly into the oak beam above the doorway. W.H. 1948. The same year the trust was created. The same year his grandfather decided to secure a future he'd never lived to see. Bill ran his fingers over the carved initials. "You were smarter than any of us knew," he murmured. Inside, the cabin smelled like old pine and dust, familiar, grounding. The small living space held the same stone fireplace, the same narrow table where his grandfather used to smoke his pipe while telling stories about building a legacy from nothing. Bill walked through each room slowly, letting memory and meaning settle into the cracks betrayal had carved inside him. For the first time since the storm began, he didn't feel broken. He felt anchored. A pickup truck rumbled up the path outside. Harold stepped out, wearing an old jacket and carrying a thermos like he always did. When he walked into the cabin, his eyes softened. "Well," Harold said, scanning the room, Looks just like your grandfather left it. Bill nodded, feels like he's still here. Harold took a seat at the table. He would have been proud of how you handled everything. Most men your age would have folded, but you stood back up. I didn't think I could, Bill admitted quietly. That's what betrayal does, Harold replied. Takes the wind out of your chest, but character, that's what puts it back. Bill sat across from him, the words settling with a weight that felt right. For a long moment, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the wind press against the old cabin walls. Finally, Bill spoke. This trust, this cabin, he left it all for a reason, not just money, a reminder. He looked around again. This place pulled me back from the edge. Harold nodded slowly. Then keep it, preserve it, make it mean something again. And in that moment, Bill knew what needed to be done. I won. To restore it, he said. Not modernize, restore. Keep everything my grandfather built intact. Make it a place for family gatherings, a piece of where we came from. Harold smiled, eyes bright with approval. A heritage site, a legacy worth passing on. Later that afternoon, Michael arrived, crunching up the path with a tool bag slung over his shoulder. Came to check the wiring, he joked, stepping inside before pausing in surprise. Wow, I haven't been here since I was a kid. Bill smiled softly. We're bringing it back. Michael looked at him, really looked, and something eased in his expression. Dad, that's a good idea, a real good idea. They walked the cabin together, talking repairs and future plans. But when they returned to the main room, Michael's tone shifted, thoughtful, reflective. You know, Dad, after everything that happened, maybe it's time we do what Grandpa did. He paused. Create a new family trust, one for the next generation, one that protects what we've rebuilt. Bill felt something stir in his chest, something warm, steady, purposeful. A trust, he repeated, for you and Emma, for your kids someday. Michael nodded. A legacy that can't be touched, just like the 1948 one saved you. Bill absorbed the idea, feeling its weight and its promise. A new trust, a new beginning, a new chapter rooted in wisdom, not fear. He placed a hand on the old wooden table, grounding himself in the moment. Your grandfather wanted security for me. Maybe it's time I do the same for you. Michael smiled, a warm, grateful smile that eased some final ache in Bill's heart. As the sun began to set, the three of them stepped outside, watching the golden light spill over the clearing. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and the quiet hum of something healing. For the first time in nearly a year, Bill felt whole. The pain was still there, echoes of betrayal, old wounds, but it no longer controlled him. It no longer owned him. It was dissolving into something quieter, something smaller. In its place rose dignity, strength, and pride. His grandfather had saved him once, with foresight. And now, standing at the cabin door, Bill felt the pull of purpose return to him like a tide coming home. He wasn't just surviving. He was rebuilding a legacy. The riverside home didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. Clean lines, tall windows, natural light pouring in from every angle. Nothing like the heavy, memory-soaked house where years of betrayal had quietly taken root. This one sat on a gentle bend of the James River, its back porch overlooking calm waters that shimmered like brushed metal in the afternoon sun. When Bill first stepped inside, carrying nothing but a folder of closing documents and the house keys dangling in his hand, he paused. The open space, the smell of new paint, the quiet hum of the river outside, it hit him all at once. New, untouched, unburdened. He placed his hand on the wall near the entrance and whispered, "Let's try this again." Over the next few weeks, life began to rearrange itself into something recognizable again. Not the life he'd once had, but a new one shaped by survival and deliberate choices. Emma arrived the second day after he moved in, arms full of shopping bags, paint swatches, a tape measure hanging from her neck. "Dad, we're giving this place a soul," she announced before he could protest. Bill watched her drift from room to room, placing warm colors in the living area, choosing soft, earth-toned fabrics, insisting on a reading lamp near the river window because you deserve good light when you put your feet up. He let her take the lead, not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood that letting someone help wasn't a weakness. It was connection. It was healing. As they arranged framed photos of Michael and Emma from their childhood, photos Rebecca had rarely allowed him to display, Bill felt a warmth return to the center of the home, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Michael visited just as the last box was unpacked. He brought laptops, binders, and a list of secure investment strategies. They sat at the dining table overlooking the water, the sunlight turning Michael's spreadsheets gold. "Dad, here," Michael said, sliding a portfolio across to him. "Low risk, high stability, strong growth without exposure. This section," he tapped a column, "is what I'll manage personally." Bill lifted an eyebrow. "Personally?" Michael nodded. "You trusted the wrong people before. Now you're trusting the right ones." Bill sat back, emotions gathering quietly in his chest. "I do trust you." Michael smiled. "Then let me help build the next decade of your life the way you built the first two of mine." Outside, the river flowed steadily, as if echoing the shift inside Bill himself. The turbulence was behind him. The current ahead was slow, steady, predictable. Over the next weeks, Bill found himself reconnecting with people he hadn't seen in years. Old Fry. NDS invited him to lunch, to fishing trips, to quiet gatherings by fireplaces. He had avoided them during the chaos, unsure, ashamed, too hollow to participate. But now he found himself laughing again, telling stories again, remembering who he had been before betrayal gnawed at his edges. One evening, Harold sat beside him on the back porch, sipping a dark amber whiskey. "You look 10 years younger," Harold said with a grin. "That's what peace feels like," Bill replied. "What's the plan now?" Harold asked. Bill looked out at the river, the sky shifting colors as the season eased into early winter. "To live," he said simply, "on my own terms." The betrayal had carved deep scars. That much was undeniable. But it had also done something unexpected. It forced him to evolve, to strip away illusions, to rebuild with intention rather than habit. He thought about the version of himself from a year ago, a man who trusted blindly, who overlooked small signs, who assumed loyalty simply because he offered it. That man was gone, and in his place stood someone quieter, sharper, wiser. Not colder, just clearer. As the season turned, the riverside home settled into a rhythm. The mornings were calm and bright. The evenings were gentle, filled with soft lamps and the distant hum of crickets. Emma often stopped by with baked bread or new pillows she insisted fit the aesthetic. Michael dropped in to give updates on investments or simply to sit with him on the porch. And for the first time in a long while, Bill looked forward, not back. As December approached, he prepared for a holiday without guilt, without masked tension, without lies simmering beneath the surface. A holiday built on truth, resilience, and family earned, not family betrayed. One night, as he placed a small wreath on the front door, Bill stepped back and admired the simple decoration glowing under the porch light. This house wasn't a reward. It wasn't compensation. It was a beginning. A new life, built from ashes that no longer burned. Thanksgiving arrived with a soft gray sky and the smell of wood smoke drifting along the river. Bill woke early, the way he used to when the house was full of family years ago. But this morning carried a different weight, lighter, steadier, unburdened. He moved through the kitchen quietly, preparing the dishes he'd always made. Roasted vegetables, cornbread stuffing, the apple pie recipe his grandfather taught him when he was barely old enough to reach the counter. By late afternoon, the The dining room glowed with warm amber light. The river shimmered beyond the windows. And one by one, the people who had stood beside him through the worst year of his life walked through the door. Michael carried a tray of smoked turkey. Emma brought a basket of fresh rolls wrapped in a warm towel. Harold entered last, tipping his cap as if the moment required a gentle nod of respect. "Looks good in here, Bill," Harold said, scanning the room with approving eyes. "It feels right," Bill replied. They gathered around the table. No empty chairs for ghosts of betrayal, no tension hanging in the air, no words unspoken. Just the four of them, sharing the kind of quiet joy that comes after surviving something that should have broken you. Dinner flowed easily. Laughter returned naturally. Michael teased Emma about her cooking skills. Harold shared old stories that made Bill shake his head. And for the first time in a long time, Bill didn't feel like a man recovering from disaster. He felt like a man living again. When the meal began to wind down, Bill rose from his chair, holding his glass of cider. The room fell into a comfortable hush. "I won't make a long speech," he began, voice steady. "But this year taught me more than any other, about strength, about clarity, and most of all about loyalty." Michael and Emma exchanged soft looks, their eyes shining. "I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty," Bill continued. "Choices do, and you three," he paused, taking them in, "chose to stand with me. That means more than I'll ever be able to put into words." He lifted his glass, to resilience, to truth, and to family, the real kind. Glasses clinked gently. The moment settled like a warm blanket across the table. After dinner, they moved to the living room where a soft fire crackled. The TV murmured quietly in the background until a breaking news banner slid across the bottom of the screen. Michael reached for the remote to turn it up. "Former attorney Dennis Crane has been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison," the reporter announced. "Charges include financial fraud, elder exploitation, and obstruction of justice." A video clip flashed, Dennis in an orange jumpsuit, head bowed, hands cuffed. He didn't shout this time, didn't blame anyone, he just looked hollow. Emma glanced at Bill cautiously. "Dad, are you okay?" Bill watched the screen for a long, still moment, then he nodded. "I am." The report continued. In related coverage, Rebecca Hargrove, involved in Crane's fraudulent schemes, has taken a modest retail job at a local store while handling civil penalties. Sources say she has not commented publicly. Bill didn't need to see the footage. He already understood what it meant. Rebecca's fall wasn't something he celebrated. It wasn't something he enjoyed. It was simply reality, an ending she had chosen long before she realized the cost. He turned the TV off. Silence returned, soft, steady, peaceful. Bill leaned back in his chair, releasing a long, slow breath, not a sigh of exhaustion but of closure, real closure, the kind that settles deep, healing what words and justice alone can't touch. After Michael and Emma cleared the dishes, and Harold stepped outside for some air, Bill walked into his study. The room was dim, lit only by the small lamp near his desk. He opened the drawer and pulled out a leather folder, the one that had changed the course of everything. Inside were the documents from the 1948 trust, yellowed pages, old signatures, the legacy of a man he had admired all his life. Bill ran a hand over the top page, feeling the texture of history beneath his fingertips. This trust had saved him financially, but it had done more than that. It had reminded him of who he came from, of the integrity he carried, of the strength woven into him long before betrayal tried to rip him apart. He closed the folder gently. Then, standing alone in the quiet room, he whispered with a soft, grateful smile, "Grandpa, you saved me twice." The river hummed outside. The fire crackled in the living room. The home felt full, warm, whole. Bill stepped out to rejoin his family, carrying not the weight of the past, but the calm victory of a man who had reclaimed his life.